Jinho Kim stood outside the crystalline chamber and tried to calm his racing heart. His uniform felt too tight. His hands were sweating. He had spent 6 months preparing for this moment, but nothing felt like enough. The door in front of him was not really a door. It was made of some kind of crystal that seemed alive. Colors moved through it like water. Jinho had seen many strange things since joining the Galactic Coalition, but the Galaxy architecture still amazed him. Everything they built looked like frozen light. A soft chime told him it was time. The crystal door dissolved into mist, and Jinho walked through. His legs felt weak, but he kept his face calm. That was what they taught him in training. Never show fear to alien species. Always appear confident. The chamber inside took his breath away. The walls were transparent crystal, and outside them, space stretched forever. Stars burned in the distance. A massive planet hung below the station, blue and green and beautiful. But Jinho barely noticed any of this. Ambassador Nari stood at the center of the room, and she was the most incredible thing Jinho had ever seen. The Galaxy were humanoid, which meant they had 2 arms, 2 legs, and walked upright like humans. But that was where the similarity ended. Nari's skin was not skin at all. It was smooth and semi-transparent, glowing softly from within. Patterns moved across her face and arms. They looked like constellations, like someone had painted star maps on her body with light. Right now, those patterns glowed with soft blue and silver colors. They pulsed gently, creating waves of light that flowed from her shoulders down to her fingertips. Her eyes were completely silver without any white or iris. They reflected the starlight from outside. Jinho forgot to breathe for a moment. He had seen pictures of the Galaxy. He had watched videos. But none of that prepared him for seeing one in person. The way she moved was like dancing, even when she was just standing still. Every gesture carried grace. Nari turned to face him fully. Her head tilted slightly, a gesture that seemed curious. Jinho remembered his training and bowed in the human style. Then he placed his right hand over his heart in the Galaxy greeting. He had practiced that movement 1,000 times. He was supposed to say something formal, something diplomatic. The words were ready in his mind, but they got stuck in his throat. Instead, without thinking, he muttered in Korean under his breath. The translation device on his collar was supposed to filter private thoughts. It was supposed to only translate direct speech, but something went wrong. Maybe it was the crystal in the room interfering with the electronics. Maybe it was just bad luck. His quiet Korean words came out of the device in perfect Galaxy. The musical sounds filled the chamber. Jinho realized what happened a second too late. The room became very quiet. Nari's patterns stopped moving. They froze in place, then slowly changed color. The soft blue and silver faded away. Deep violet spread across her skin like ink in water. Jinho felt his stomach drop. He had studied Galaxy color patterns, but violet was not in any of his textbooks. He had no idea what emotion it meant. His mind raced. Had he insulted her? Was violet anger? Disgust? Fear? Ambassador Nari took a step toward him. Then another. Her silver eyes locked onto his face. Jinho wanted to run. He wanted to apologize. He wanted to sink through the floor and disappear. But his training held him in place. Never run from an alien species. Never show panic. She stopped an arm's length away from him. This close, he could see the details of her patterns. They were incredibly complex. Each line connected to others, creating shapes within shapes. The violet color pulsed like a heartbeat. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind chimes. It was musical, with harmonics that human voices could never make. The translation device rendered it into English, but Jinho could hear the beauty of the original underneath. She did not sound angry. She sounded surprised, maybe even pleased. Jinho could not tell. His heart was beating so hard he thought she must be able to hear it. Nari's pattern shifted again. The violet faded, replaced by warm amber and gold. The colors swirled together, creating new designs across her features. She tilted her head again, and this time Jinho recognized the gesture. It was curiosity. Then she did something completely unexpected. She laughed. The sound was like bells, light and clear. It echoed off the crystal walls. Jinho stared at her. His brain could not process what was happening. He had expected diplomatic coldness, or maybe formal correction. He had prepared for a dozen different scenarios. Laughter was not one of them. Nari raised one hand. Her fingers were long and delicate, and the light patterns flowed across them like water. She gestured for him to relax. Then she spoke again, and this time there was warmth in her voice. Jinho felt his face burning. He knew he was blushing. His fair skin always showed embarrassment clearly. He tried to form words, tried to apologize, but nothing came out except a strangled sound. The ambassador seemed to understand his distress. Her pattern softened to a gentle pink mixed with gold. She gestured toward two chairs near the window. They were made of the same crystal as everything else, but somehow they looked comfortable. Jinho followed her, his legs feeling unsteady. He sat down carefully. The crystal was warm under him, and it seemed to mold itself to his body. Through the transparent wall beside them, stars drifted past as the station rotated. Nari sat across from him. She folded her hands in her lap, and her patterns continued their slow dance of pink and gold. When she looked at him, her silver eyes seemed kind. She began to speak, and Jinho listened in growing amazement. What she told him changed everything he thought he knew about this mission, about the Galaxy, about why he was really here. The stars outside continued their slow dance. Inside the crystal chamber, a human and an alien began what would become the most important conversation in galactic history. And it all started with an accidental compliment and a color that Jinho had never seen before. The violet, he would later learn, was not anger or fear. It was wonder. Complete and total wonder, something that Galaxy only felt in the rarest of moments, something that Ambassador Nari, in 300 years of life, had almost forgotten how to feel. But that discovery was still ahead. For now, Jinho just tried to control his breathing and pretend his hands were not shaking. He was 26 years old, fresh from Earth, and he had just accidentally flirted with one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Somehow, impossibly, she seemed to like it. Nari watched the young human try to compose himself. His face had turned a fascinating shade of red. She had studied human biology extensively, but seeing the blood rush to his cheeks in real time was different from reading about it. It was honest. Raw. Real. She knew she should let him off the hook. The poor man looked like he wanted to disappear, but something made her pause. Something about his genuine reaction intrigued her. In 300 years, Nari had met thousands of beings from hundreds of species. They all reacted to her the same way. Fear mostly. Sometimes awe, often discomfort. The Galaxy appearance disturbed many species, their crystalline features, their glowing patterns, their silver eyes. Other races found them cold, alien, unsettling. But this human had looked at her and thought she was beautiful, not impressive, not intimidating. Beautiful, like artwork, like something worth admiring. No one had ever said that before. Jinho finally found his voice. He started apologizing rapidly in English. The words tumbled out in a rush. He explained about the translation device, about the crystal interference, about how he never meant to broadcast his private thoughts. He was so sorry. So incredibly sorry. Please forgive him. Nari raised her hand and he stopped talking immediately. His eyes went wide with worry. She almost smiled. Almost. The Galaxy did not smile the way humans did. They showed emotions through their patterns instead. She spoke carefully, choosing her words. She told him there was no need to apologize. What he said was not an insult. In fact, among her people, commenting on another's patterns was the highest form of compliment. It was intimate, personal, reserved for close bonds. Jinho's expression shifted from panic to confusion. He clearly did not understand. Nari decided to be direct. Humans appreciated directness according to her research. She explained that most species found the Galaxy appearance frightening. Their crystalline biology was too different, too strange. Most ambassadors she worked with avoided looking at her directly. They focused on her words, not her presence. They treated her like a tool, a means to an end. But he had looked at her and seen art, beauty, something worth appreciating. In 3 centuries, no one else had ever done that. Jinho listened with growing amazement. His embarrassment slowly faded, replaced by curiosity. He leaned forward slightly in his chair. The crystal beneath him glowed a little brighter, responding to his body heat. He asked why the Galactic Coalition had requested a human translator for this assignment. Nari's patterns shifted to a deeper gold. This was the real question, the one that mattered. She told him the truth. Humans were unique in the galaxy. Most species evolved alone on their planets, or they conquered other species they encountered. They learned to see differences as threats, as things to fear or dominate. But humans were different. Earth was a world of incredible diversity, thousands of cultures, hundreds of languages, countless different ways of living. And somehow, humans learned to not just tolerate this diversity. They learned to celebrate it, to find beauty in it. Humans could look at something completely alien and find it wonderful. They could appreciate art from cultures nothing like their own. They could fall in love across any boundary. This ability was rare in the galaxy, maybe unique. The Coalition needed this ability now. Two species, the Krenth and the Solari, were on the edge of war. They had been fighting for generations. Both sides saw the other as monsters, as enemies impossible to understand. Traditional diplomacy had failed. Logic and strategy had failed. Fear kept them apart. The Coalition hoped humans could bridge that gap, not through military power or advanced technology, through empathy, through the ability to see beauty where others saw only strangeness. Jinho sat back in his chair. His mind raced. This was so much bigger than he realized. He thought he was just here to translate, to help with basic communication. But they wanted him to do something much harder. They wanted him to teach two species to see each other differently. He asked if she thought it was possible. Could one human really make that kind of difference? Nari's patterns swirled with pink and amber. She told him she had doubts at first. The challenge seemed impossible. But then he walked into this room and looked at her like she was a masterpiece. Like her strangeness was something to admire, not fear. If he could do that instinctively without thinking, maybe he could teach others to do the same. Maybe his natural human perspective was exactly what the galaxy needed. Jinho felt overwhelmed. The weight of expectations pressed down on him. He was just one person, 26 years old, fresh from Earth. How could he possibly save entire civilizations? Nari seemed to sense his doubt. Her patterns softened to gentle blue. She told him he would not be alone. She would work with him, guide him. Together they would find a way. Then she said something that surprised him even more. She told him she had studied human culture for years. She loved human poetry, human art, human music. She found it all fascinating, beautiful. In a way, she understood his perspective better than he might think. To prove it, she recited a poem. In Korean. It was an old poem, written centuries ago about the moon and longing. Her pronunciation was perfect. The words sounded strange in her wind chime voice, but somehow right, somehow beautiful. Jinho stared at her in wonder. A 300-year-old alien ambassador who glowed with living light had just recited ancient Korean poetry to him, in a crystal chamber floating in space, while stars drifted past outside. He started to laugh, not from mockery or nervousness, from pure joy, from the absurdity and beauty of the moment, from the realization that maybe, just maybe, this impossible mission might work. Nari's patterns burst into brilliant gold. She told him that was the first time in decades she had heard genuine laughter in her presence. Most beings were too formal, too careful, but his laughter was free, honest. She liked it. They talked for hours after that. The formal meeting became a real conversation. Jinho forgot to be nervous. Nari forgot to be diplomatic. They discussed art and culture. They compared human and Valaxi perspectives on beauty. They shared stories about their very different lives. Jinho learned that Valaxi patterns changed with emotions, but also with thoughts. Deep concentration made them geometric. Strong feelings made them fluid and wild. Nari's patterns right now were dancing like auroras. She told him that meant she was happy, truly happy. When the meeting finally ended, they stood together at the crystal window. The planet below was entering its night side. Lights sparkled across the dark surface like stars reflected from above. Jinho realized he was not afraid anymore. Not of the mission, not of Nari, not of the vast galaxy waiting outside. He felt ready, ready to try, ready to help. As he turned to leave, Nari called his name. Her patterns were soft pink again. She thanked him, not for agreeing to help with the mission, but for seeing her, really seeing her, for making her feel like a person instead of a diplomatic tool. Jinho smiled. He told her that she was easy to see. Anyone who looked would notice how amazing she was. Her patterns flared bright for a moment. Then she did something unexpected. She reached out and touched his hand briefly. Her fingers were cool and smooth. The contact lasted only a second, but in that second, Jinho felt a connection. Something deeper than words, something that told him this partnership would be special, important, maybe even life-changing. He left the crystal chamber with his heart full of hope. Outside in the corridor, he finally let himself feel the full weight of what happened. He had not ruined everything with his accidental comment. Instead, he had started something new, something extraordinary. Behind him, through the crystal walls, Nari stood watching the stars. Her patterns glowed with colors she had not felt in years. Wonder, hope, and something else. Something new and unfamiliar. Something that felt like the beginning of friendship. Or maybe something more. 3 weeks passed quickly. Jinho and Nari worked together every day. They prepared for the first meeting with the Krenth and Sulari representatives. The task felt impossible, but slowly they built a plan. Jinho learned more about the conflict. The Krenth were a species that communicated through light. Their bodies produced bioluminescent displays, flashing in complex patterns. Every emotion, every thought showed in their glow. They could not lie, could not hide. Their whole culture was built on visible honesty. The Sulari were completely different. They were builders, architects. Their cities were made of sound-resonant materials that hummed and sang. They communicated through harmonics, creating music with their voices and bodies. To them, the world was rhythm and vibration. These two species had been neighbors for thousands of years. At first, they ignored each other. Then they made contact. It went badly. The Krenth found Sulari architecture disturbing. The constant humming hurt their light-sensitive eyes. The Sulari found Krenth flashing lights overwhelming and chaotic. What started as misunderstanding became conflict. Conflict became war. Generations of fighting followed. Now both sides saw each other as enemies, as monsters. Peace talks had failed dozens of times. Mediators gave up. The galaxy expected war to continue forever. Jinho studied recordings of both species. At first he agreed they seemed incompatible. The Krenth were too bright, too intense. The Sulari architecture looked alien and strange. But the more he watched, the more he saw something else. The Krenth light displays were not just communication. They were art, beautiful art. Each pattern told a story. Each color meant something. It was like watching living paintings, like seeing emotions made visible. The Sulari buildings were not just structures. They were instruments, giant musical instruments. The wind played them. Rain played them. Everything made harmony. Their cities were symphonies written in stone and metal. Jinho realized something important. Both species were artists. Both created beauty. They just did it in completely different ways, ways that seemed to clash. But what if they did not have to clash? What if they could complement each other instead? He shared this idea with Nari. They were in her office, surrounded by star maps and diplomatic reports. When he explained his thinking, her patterns shifted to bright silver. That meant she was intrigued, thinking hard. She told him that traditional peace talks focused on resources, territory, strategic advantages. They approached war like a problem to solve with logic. But logic had failed. Maybe art could succeed where logic could not. Jinho suggested a cultural exchange, not for politics, not for strategy, just for beauty. Let the Krenth see Sulari architecture without the pressure of negotiation. Let the Sulari watch Krenth light displays without fear. Let both sides experience each other's art. Nari warned him it was risky. Both sides might refuse. Or worse, they might see it as an insult. as if art could fix centuries of bloodshed. But Jinho insisted they had to try. What did they have to lose? War was already happening. Things could not get much worse. Nari looked at him for a long moment. Her patterns swirled with colors Jinho was learning to read. Blue for thought, gold for approval, pink for affection. All three mixed together. She agreed to propose it to the Coalition Council. They would need permission, funding, cooperation from both species. It would be difficult. But she believed in his vision. More than that, she believed in him. The proposal went to the council the next day. Jinho was not allowed in the chamber. He waited outside, pacing nervously. Other diplomats walked past him, giving him strange looks. A human trying to end a 1,000-year war with art galleries. It sounded crazy, maybe it was crazy. Hours passed. Finally, Nari emerged. Her patterns were brilliant gold. The council approved the plan. Barely. Many members voted against it. But enough voted in favor. They would get their chance. The next weeks were chaos. Jinho coordinated with dozens of species. They set up an exhibition hall on Harmony Station. A neutral space where both Krenth and Sulari could display their art. Security was heavy. Both sides were suspicious. But slowly, reluctantly, they agreed to participate. Jinho barely slept. He worked with artists from both species. The Krenth sent light sculptors, masters of their craft who could create displays that made people weep. The Sulari sent sound architects, builders who understood harmony better than anyone. Through it all, Nari stayed beside him. She managed the diplomatic side, calmed fears, handled objections. She was brilliant at her job. Jinho watched her work with growing admiration. She had lived 300 years, but she approached each challenge with fresh energy, with hope. One night they stood together in the empty exhibition hall. The displays were ready. Tomorrow, representatives from both species would arrive. This would either work or fail spectacularly. Jinho felt doubt creeping in. What if he was wrong? What if art was not enough? What if he made things worse? Nari sensed his worry. Her pattern softened to gentle pink. She told him something she had never told anyone. She had been a mediator for 3 centuries. She had ended conflicts, saved lives, won victories, but she had never felt truly proud of her work. It always felt mechanical, soulless, like moving pieces on a board. But this felt different. This felt real. For the first time in 300 years, she felt like she was doing something meaningful, something that came from the heart, not just from duty. She told him that humans had a gift. They felt things deeply. They cared about beauty, about connection, about meaning. The galaxy needed that gift. She needed that gift. Jinho looked at her glowing face, at the patterns dancing across her skin. He thought about how scared he had been 3 weeks ago, how he almost ran from this challenge. Now he could not imagine being anywhere else. He thanked her for believing in him, for taking a chance on a crazy human idea, for being the best partner he could imagine. Her patterns flared bright. She reached out and took his hand. Her cool fingers wrapped around his warm ones. The touch sent electricity up his arm. Not from technology, from connection, from 2 very different beings finding common ground. They stood like that for a while, hand in hand, alien and human, looking at the art they had gathered, hoping against hope that beauty could bridge the unbridgeable. The next day would tell them if they were right. If humanity's gift for seeing beauty in the strange could change the fate of worlds. If 2 enemies could look at each other's art and see not monsters but fellow artists, fellow souls. As they left the hall together, Jinho felt something shift, not just in the mission. In himself. He was not just a translator anymore. He was a bridge. And standing beside him was someone who understood exactly what that meant. Someone who was becoming more important to him every day. Someone whose light patterns made his heart beat faster. Someone he was starting to care about in ways that went far beyond professional partnership. But that realization would have to wait. Tomorrow they had a galaxy to change. The cultural exchange was working. Against all odds, it was actually working. The Krenth delegates arrived first. They entered the exhibition hall with their bodies flashing defensive red. Ready for a trap, ready for insult. But when they saw the Sulari architecture displays, something changed. The models showed buildings that sang. Jinho had recordings playing, wind moving through metal channels, rain tapping on resonant surfaces. Each structure created music. complex harmonies that shifted with weather and time. The Krenth stopped flashing. Their lights went soft, curious. One of them approached a model carefully. They listened to the sounds. Their light patterns began to pulse in rhythm with the music. Without meaning to, they were dancing to Solari architecture. When the Solari delegates arrived, they were equally defensive. Their bodies hummed with low warning tones. But then they saw the Krenth light displays. Living paintings made of bioluminescence. Stories told in color and motion. One display showed a Krenth birth, the parents' lights dancing together, creating new patterns, the moment of the child's first glow. It was intimate, beautiful, universal. Any species could understand the love shown in those lights. The Solari humming changed, softened. One of them made a sound that their translator rendered as wonder. They had never seen Krenth light as art before, only as weapon, only as threat. For 3 hours, both groups explored the exhibition separately. Then something unexpected happened. A Krenth and a Solari ended up at the same display. Both reached to adjust the viewing angle at the same moment. Their hands touched. They both froze. Enemy species contact. Every instinct said to pull away, to prepare for attack, but neither did. They looked at each other. Really looked. The Krenth's lights were soft gold. Not aggressive. Just curious. The Solari's hum was gentle. Questioning. They began to talk, carefully, about the art. The Krenth asked about the Solari building techniques. The Solari asked about the meaning of different light colors. It was awkward, hesitant, but it was conversation, real conversation. Jinho watched from the observation deck above. His hands gripped the railing. Nari stood beside him, her patterns glowing with hopeful amber. This was it. This was the moment they had worked for. More Krenth and Solari began talking, sharing thoughts about the art, finding common ground, not through politics or strategy, through appreciation, through beauty. Jinho felt tears in his eyes. It was working. His crazy idea was working. Human perspective was changing in ancient war. Nari's hand found his. She squeezed gently. Her patterns were brilliant gold mixed with pink. Pride and affection. She did not say anything. She did not need to. They had done this together. That night, Jinho returned to his quarters feeling lighter than air. He sent a message to his family on Earth, told them about the exhibition, about the breakthrough. He could not wait to tell them everything when he got home. A knock on his door surprised him. It was late. He opened it to find Woojin Park, another human diplomat stationed on Harmony. They had trained together back on Earth. Woojin was a friend. Woojin came in looking serious. He congratulated Jinho on the success of the exhibition. Then he said they needed to talk. About Nari, Jinho felt his stomach tighten. Woojin explained that he had noticed how much time they spent together. How Nari's patterns changed around Jinho. How they looked at each other. Other people had noticed too. Diplomats gossiped. The Galaxy Council was watching. This could become a problem. Jinho protested. They were just colleagues, partners, friends. Nothing inappropriate was happening. Woojin shook his head. He had researched Galaxy biology. Their emotions were different from human emotions. Deeper, more permanent. When a Galaxy bonded with someone, it was forever. Their patterns could not hide it. Could not lie. Nari's patterns around Jinho showed attachment. Strong attachment. If the Galaxy Council decided she had compromised her objectivity, they could remove her from service. Discredit 300 years of diplomatic work. End her career, and it would not just hurt Nari. It could damage human-Galaxy relations. Undermine the peace process. Everything they had built. Woojin left after making his point. He was trying to help, trying to warn a friend, but his words hit Jinho like a hammer. Jinho sat alone in his quarters for hours. He thought about Nari, about her glowing face, her kind patterns, the way she made him feel seen and valued, the way his heart raced when she smiled. When she took his hand, he had been telling himself it was just professional admiration. Just friendship. But Woojin was right. It was more. It had been more for a while. He just had not wanted to admit it. He cared about Nari deeply. Maybe he was even falling in love with her. Which was crazy. She was an alien, 300 years old, a being of living light and crystal. How could that even work? But more importantly, his feelings put her at risk. His very presence around her could ruin her life. The responsible thing was clear. He needed to create distance. Be professional. Protect her from his own emotions. The next day, Jinho avoided Nari. He sent messages instead of visiting her office. Kept conversations brief, professional. When they had meetings, he sat far from her. Did not meet her eyes, Nari noticed immediately. Her patterns turned confused blue, concerned silver. She asked if something was wrong. Jinho said he was fine. Just tired. Just busy. She did not believe him. He could tell. But she did not push. She gave him space. Her patterns showed hurt, though, confusion, worry. A week passed. The peace talks were progressing. Krenth and Solari were actually negotiating, really talking. But Jinho could not enjoy the success. He felt hollow, empty. Nari finally cornered him in a private corridor. Her patterns were agitated, multiple colors swirling. She demanded to know what was happening. Why he was avoiding her, what she had done wrong. Jinho tried to make excuses, but she stopped him. Her voice was sharp, musical but firm. She told him to be honest, to speak the truth. Whatever it was, she could handle it. So he told her about Wu Jin's warning, about the risk to her career, about how his presence around her was dangerous, how other people were noticing, how the Galaxy Council might use their relationship against her. He told her he was trying to protect her, to do the right thing. Nari listened silently. Her patterns cycled through emotions too fast to read. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she told him he was an idiot. Her patterns blazed red. Anger. She had lived 300 years. She had handled complicated politics, dangerous situations, impossible negotiations. She did not need a 26-year-old human to protect her from her own choices. She asked if he thought she was stupid, if he thought she did not know the risks. Of course she knew. She had always known, but for the first time in 3 centuries she felt alive. She felt seen. She felt like a person, not just a diplomatic tool. She told him that his accidental compliment changed everything. That moment when he looked at her and saw beauty instead of alien strangeness, that was when she remembered what it felt like to be valued for herself. Not for her skills. Not for her species. For herself. Her patterns shifted to deep purple. Vulnerability. She admitted that yes, she had bonded with him. Her patterns showed it. Her emotions were beyond her control now, and yes, it was risky. It could cost her everything, but it was worth it. He was worth it. Jinho stared at her. His heart pounded. She had just confessed feelings he had not dared to hope for. She cared about him. Truly cared. Despite all the reasons it was complicated. Despite all the risks. He reached for her hand. She took it. Her cool fingers wrapped around his. They stood in the empty corridor, human and Galaxy, holding on to each other like they were the only solid things in a shifting universe. The galaxy was watching. The risks were real, but in that moment none of it mattered. They had found something rare, something precious, and they were not going to let fear take it away. Jinho was in his quarters when the alarm sounded, a deep pulsing wail that meant emergency. He threw on clothes and ran to the command center. Other people rushed through the corridors, faces tight with fear. The cultural exchange building was destroyed. A massive bomb had torn through it during the night. The beautiful displays, the art that was bringing peace, all of it was rubble now. Smoking, burning, gone. Worse, there were casualties. Dozens dead. Both Krenth and Solari, who had been working late on the exhibits. Security guards, maintenance staff, innocent people. The Krenth immediately blamed the Solari. The Solari blamed the Krenth. Accusations flew. Threats were made. Within hours, both species recalled their ambassadors. Peace talks collapsed. The fragile connection built through art shattered like glass. War was coming. Real war. The kind that would spread across systems. That would drag the entire coalition into conflict. Jinho worked frantically with the security teams. Something felt wrong about the attack. Both species blamed each other too quickly, too perfectly, as if they had been waiting for an excuse to return to war. Nari was in emergency sessions with the Coalition Council. Her patterns were dark red, stress and exhaustion. She barely slept. Neither did Jinho. They passed each other in corridors, exchanged quick updates, but had no time for anything else. On the 3rd day after the bombing, Jinho found something. a fragment of the explosive device. The technology was not Krenth, not Solari. It was Coalition standard. Someone from the Coalition itself had planted the bomb. He ran to Nari's office with the evidence. She was meeting with her Valaxi superiors through a communication link. They were visible on the screen, their patterns cold blue. Disapproving. Jinho burst in without knocking. Showed her the evidence. Her patterns flared with shock and then understanding. Someone in the Coalition wanted the war to continue, wanted the peace process to fail, but who and why? They investigated together, working through the night. Nari used her diplomatic access to search records. Jinho interviewed witnesses. Slowly, a picture emerged. A faction within the Coalition opposed human involvement in galactic politics. They saw human methods as dangerous, emotional, unpredictable. They preferred the old ways. Logic, strategy, clear boundaries between species. These isolationists feared that human empathy would change the galaxy, would break down the walls that kept species separate and safe. So they sabotaged the peace process. Killed innocents. Started a war. All to prove that human methods did not work. That emotions had no place in diplomacy. Jinho felt sick. People died because of his idea, because he suggested using art instead of logic. The isolationists used his own approach against him, made it look like human methods caused disaster. Nari saw his guilt. Her pattern softened to comforting pink. She told him this was not his fault. The isolationists made their choice. They chose violence. That was on them, not on him, but Jinho barely heard her. He was thinking about the Krenth and Solari who died, about the families they left behind, about the war that was coming. They had evidence now, proof that a third party orchestrated the bombing, but presenting it would be difficult. The isolationists were powerful, well-connected, and some were respected council members. More than that, presenting the evidence required Jinho and Nari to work together at the emergency council session, to stand side by side, which would make their relationship obvious to everyone. The Valaxi Council had already contacted Nari. They had seen reports about her and the human, about her changing patterns. They ordered her to distance herself from Jinho immediately, to maintain professional boundaries, to put duty above personal feelings. If she defied them and presented evidence with Jinho at her side, they would remove her from service. 300 years of work gone, her reputation destroyed. She would never serve as a diplomat again. Jinho told her to stay out of it. He would present the evidence alone, take the risk alone. She had too much to lose. Nari's patterns flared angry red. She told him to stop trying to protect her. She was not fragile. She was not helpless. She had fought bigger battles than this, but Jinho insisted. He could not let her throw away her life. Not for him. Not for this, they argued. Really argued. Voices raised. Emotions raw. It was the first time they had fought. And it hurt. It hurt both of them. Finally, Nari's patterns went completely still. She looked at him with her silver eyes. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but firm. She told him that for 300 years she did her duty. She served the council. She put responsibility above everything else. She lived a life without meaning, without joy, without love. Then a young human walked into her chamber and looked at her like she was beautiful, like she mattered. He showed her what it meant to be seen, to be valued, to feel alive. She was not going to lose that. Not to fear, not to duty, not to anyone. She would present the evidence with him. Stand beside him in the council chamber. Let her patterns show the world what she felt. Let the consequences come, because some things were worth more than careers, more than reputations, more than safety. Love was one of those things. Jinho felt tears on his face. He reached for her and she came into his arms. They held each other tightly. Human and Valaxi. So different. So similar. Both scared. Both brave. Her patterns wrapped them both in soft light. Pink and gold and silver. Beautiful, true, impossible to hide. The emergency council session was in 2 hours. They prepared together, organized their evidence, practiced their presentation. They knew the isolationists would attack them personally, would question their objectivity, would use their relationship as a weapon. Let them try. Jinho and Nari had the truth. They had proof, and they had each other. As they walked to the council chamber, Jinho took her hand. She squeezed back. Other diplomats in the corridor stared, whispered, let them stare. Let them whisper. They entered the chamber together. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species filled the seats. The Krenth section flashed angry red. The Solari section hummed with low, threatening tones. The council members sat on their high platform, looking down with cold judgment. In the front row, the Valaxi delegation sat with their patterns icy blue, disapproving. Nari's superiors watched her with expressions that needed no translation. Jinho and Nari walked to the center of the chamber. Their footsteps echoed in the tense silence. When they reached the speaking platform, they turned to face the assembly. Nari's patterns blazed with every emotion she felt. No hiding, no pretense, just truth. Raw and powerful and beautiful, Jinho began to speak. His voice was steady despite his racing heart. He presented their evidence, showed the coalition standard explosives, traced the connections to the isolationist faction. Named names, the chamber erupted. Shouts, denials, accusations. The isolationists tried to discredit them, called them compromised, emotional, biased. One council member stood. He pointed at Nari's patterns, at the obvious emotions she felt for the human. He declared her unfit to present evidence. Her judgment was clouded by personal attachment. The Valaxi delegation nodded agreement. This was it, the moment Nari's career ended. The moment everything they built collapsed. But then Jinho did something unexpected. He stepped forward, and he began to speak about what it meant to be human, about why emotions were not a weakness, about why the galaxy needed to change. His words would change everything. The council, the war, the future. But in that moment, all he could think about was the glowing being standing beside him, the one who had given up everything to stand for truth, to stand for love, the one he would not let down, no matter what came next. The council chamber fell silent as Jinho began to speak. His voice carried across the vast space, clear, strong, human. He told them about Earth, about a world where humans evolved surrounded by diversity, where different cultures grew side by side, where people who looked different, spoke different languages, believed different things, somehow learned to live together. It was not easy. Humans fought wars over their differences, made terrible mistakes, hurt each other in countless ways. But slowly, painfully, they learned. They learned that diversity was not a threat. It was strength. He explained that humans developed something unique, the ability to form bonds across any divide, to find family beyond blood, to love across any boundary. Not despite differences, but because of them. The council member who had questioned Nari interrupted. He said emotions had no place in diplomacy, that personal feelings compromised judgment, that the Valaxi ambassador proved this by letting her attachment cloud her objectivity. Jinho shook his head. He looked directly at the council member. He said that was exactly the problem. The galaxy had been running on that philosophy for thousands of years. Pure logic, pure strategy. Keep emotions out. Keep personal connections separate, and what did that achieve? Wars that lasted generations, species that could not understand each other, a coalition held together by fear and convenience, not by genuine connection. He gestured to the Krenth and Solari sections. Both species had tried to make peace before, dozens of times, using traditional methods, logic-based negotiations, strategic compromises. All failed, every single one. But when they tried the human way, when they used art and beauty and emotional connection, progress happened. Real progress. Enemies started talking, started seeing each other as people, not monsters. The isolationists feared this. They bombed the cultural center not because human methods failed, but because they were working. Because emotional connection threatened their comfortable, logical, emotionless galaxy. Jinho's voice grew stronger. He said the council could continue the old way. Keep emotions separate. Keep species isolated. Keep walls between everyone. It was safe, predictable, cold, or they could try something new. Something human. They could accept that emotions were not weakness, that personal connections did not compromise judgment. They strengthened it, made it real, made it meaningful. He pointed to Nari. Her patterns blazed with every emotion. Love, fear, hope, determination, completely visible, completely honest. He told the council that Ambassador Nari had served for 300 years. 3 centuries of perfect logic, perfect diplomacy, perfect emotional distance. And yes, she accomplished great things. But in the past few weeks, working with emotions instead of suppressing them, she accomplished something impossible. She brought two warring species to the edge of peace, not through strategy, through connection, through letting herself care, through showing vulnerability. That was not compromised judgment. That was evolved judgment. That was the next level of diplomacy the galaxy needed. The chamber was completely silent now. Every being listened. Even the hostile ones. Even the isolationists. Jinho had their attention. He continued. He said humans were not better than other species. They were not smarter or stronger or more advanced. But they had this one gift. This ability to connect emotionally across impossible boundaries. Earth taught them that. A diverse world forced them to learn empathy or die. Now they could teach the galaxy, not through conquest, not through force, through example, through showing what genuine connection looked like. A Krenth representative stood. Their lights were uncertain yellow. They asked a question. If emotions were so powerful, why did the humans suggest art instead of direct negotiation? Jinho smiled. He explained that art was emotional connection in its purest form. Art required vulnerability, required showing your inner world to others. When you shared art, you shared your soul. The Krenth and Solari feared each other, but they could not fear each other's art, could not see beauty as a threat. By experiencing each other's art first, they built emotional bridges, created foundation for real understanding. A Solari representative stood next. Their harmonics were questioning. They said the isolationists claimed human methods caused the bombing, that emotional approaches led to death and chaos. Jinho's face became serious. He said that was a lie. A calculated lie. The isolationists caused the bombing. They murdered innocents. They did this precisely because human methods were working, because emotional connection threatened their power. Fear of change caused the bombing, not change itself. The isolationists chose violence because they could not accept a galaxy built on empathy instead of logic. He presented the evidence again. Methodically, clearly, showed the coalition standard explosives, the traced connections, the undeniable proof. Then he challenged the council. He said they had a choice. They could reject the evidence, protect the isolationists, continue the old way, keep emotions locked away, keep species separate, let the Krenth-Solari war continue, or they could accept the truth, punish those responsible, and more importantly, accept that the galaxy needed to change. That emotions had a place in diplomacy, that personal connections made things better, not worse. The Valaxi delegation shifted uncomfortably. Their patterns showed conflict, uncertainty. Jinho looked directly at them. He spoke to them specifically. He told them Ambassador Nari had given 300 years of flawless service. She earned the right to make her own choices, to feel her own emotions, to bond with whoever she wanted. If they discredited her for showing emotions, for forming connections, they proved the isolationists right. They proved that the old way was the only way. That change was impossible. But if they supported her, they showed the galaxy something new. They showed that even ancient species could evolve, could accept that emotion strengthened rather than weakened. A long silence followed. Then something unexpected happened. A Krenth representative stood. Their lights were soft blue, thoughtful. They said they had spoken with Solari representatives about the art displays, about the beauty they saw in each other's culture. Those conversations happened because of the human approach, because of art and emotion and connection. If the council rejected these methods, they rejected the only path to peace that ever worked. A Solari representative stood next. They agreed. They said the humans showed them that their enemy was not the Krenth. Their enemy was fear. Fear of the unfamiliar, fear of change, fear of connection. The human taught them to overcome fear with beauty, with art, with empathy. This was valuable. This was revolutionary. More representatives stood. Different species, different perspectives, but similar messages. The human way worked. Not perfectly, not without risk. But it worked better than centuries of cold logic. Finally, the head of the council stood. An ancient being from a species Jinho did not recognize. They spoke slowly, carefully. They said the council would investigate the bombing evidence. The isolationists would face judgment. Then they looked at Nari. They said the Valaxi ambassador showed courage, integrity, emotional honesty. These were valuable qualities. perhaps qualities the galaxy needed more of. The Valaxi delegation's pattern shifted. Some remained cold blue, disapproving, but others softened to warmer colors. Reconsideration, maybe even approval. The council head called for a vote to accept the evidence, to investigate the isolationists, to formally recognize emotional connection as a valid diplomatic tool, to support Ambassador Nari's continued service. The vote was not unanimous. Many still opposed, but more supported. Enough supported. The motion passed. The chamber erupted in noise, debate, argument, but also hope. Change was happening. Real change. Jinho felt Nari's hand find his. He looked at her. Her patterns blazed with every emotion. Joy, relief, love, so much love. They had done it. Together. Human and Valaxi. Emotion and logic. Heart and mind. They changed the galaxy. As they left the chamber, diplomats approached them. Some congratulated them. Some wanted to learn more about human methods. Some wanted to join the cultural exchange program. Interest was growing. Momentum was building. The Krenth and Sulari representatives asked to meet again. Wanted to restart talks. Wanted to try the human way properly this time. Outside in the corridor, finally alone, Jinho and Nari stopped. They looked at each other. Really looked. Seeing everything. Accepting everything. Nari's patterns softened to the most beautiful colors Jinho had ever seen. Pinks and golds and silvers all dancing together. She told him she was proud of him. Proud of his speech. Proud of his courage. Proud of who he was. Jinho smiled. He told her she was the courageous one. She risked everything. Gave up everything. For truth. For change. For him. She touched his face gently. Her cool fingers traced his cheek. She told him it was worth it. All of it, every risk, every sacrifice. He was worth it. They held each other in the empty corridor. Two beings from different worlds. Different biologies. Different histories. But connected, deeply, permanently, beautifully. The galaxy was changing. The war was ending. A new era was beginning. And they started it. Together. With an accidental compliment and a willingness to let emotions guide them instead of suppress them. The human way was spreading. And it was beautiful. The Krenth-Sulari peace treaty was signed on a beautiful spring day. Or what counted as spring on Harmony Station. The ceremony took place in a newly built cultural center. This one had better security, better protection. But the same spirit of art and connection. Representatives from both species stood together. Not separated by neutral zones. Not divided by fear, together, side by side. The Krenth flashed warm golden lights. The Sulari hummed harmonies that made the walls sing. It was beautiful. It was peace. Jinho watched from the audience. Nari sat beside him. Her patterns glowed soft pink and gold. Happiness, pride, love. She did not hide her emotions anymore. Neither did other Valaxi. The old rules about emotional distance were changing. Slowly, but changing. The isolationist faction faced trial. Evidence proved their guilt. Some were imprisoned. Others lost their positions. The galaxy learned that fear-driven violence would not be tolerated. That change was coming whether they liked it or not. More importantly, other species started adopting human methods. Cultural exchange programs spread across the coalition. Art exhibits. Music festivals. Poetry readings. Species that had been neighbors for centuries but never really knew each other began to connect. It was not perfect. There were setbacks. Some species resisted. Some conflicts could not be solved with art alone. But progress was real, measurable. Hope was spreading. Humans became known throughout the galaxy as bridge builders, as empathy teachers. Ships from Earth brought not weapons or technology, but artists, musicians, poets, teachers of emotional connection. The Coalition Council officially recognized emotional intelligence as a diplomatic skill. Schools started teaching it. Ambassadors trained in it. What started as one human's accidental compliment became a galactic movement. Jinho and Nari became the most studied partnership in recent history. Xenopsychologists wrote papers about them. Students learned their story, how a human and a Valaxi changed everything by refusing to hide their feelings, by showing the galaxy that emotions were strength, not weakness. The Valaxi Council officially apologized to Nari. They admitted their judgment was wrong. That emotional connection enhanced her diplomatic work rather than compromised it. They offered her any position she wanted, any assignment, any honor. She turned them all down. She had a different idea. On a clear morning, Jinho and Nari stood in a newly constructed building. It was not an embassy, not a council chamber. It was something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. The Coalition Cultural Institute, a school, a training center, a place where beings from any species could come to learn the human way, to study empathy, art appreciation, emotional connection, how to see beauty across any boundary. Jinho and Nari would lead it together. Partners, teachers, examples of what was possible when different beings truly connected. The first class was starting today. Students from a dozen species waited in the main hall. Some looked curious. Some looked skeptical. All looked hopeful. Before they went to greet them, Jinho and Nari stood together in a private room, looking out at the stars, at the galaxy they were helping to change. Nari asked him if he was nervous. He admitted he was. Teaching was different from diplomatic work. What if he could not explain the human perspective well enough? What if students did not understand? Nari's pattern swirled with amusement. She reminded him that he already taught the entire galaxy. His speech at the council changed everything. If he could convince hardened diplomats to embrace emotions, he could teach anyone. Jinho smiled. He looked at her, at the being who changed his life, who showed him that love could cross any boundary, who believed in him when he barely believed in himself. He told her he had been thinking about their first meeting, about his accidental compliment, about how that one moment started everything. Nari's patterns brightened. She remembered. How could she forget? That moment when a young human looked at her and saw beauty instead of strangeness. When he made her feel seen for the first time in 300 years, Jinho took her hands. His warm fingers wrapped around her cool ones. He told her that the compliment was not really an accident. Yes, the translation device malfunctioned. Yes, he did not mean to broadcast his thoughts, but the thought itself was real, genuine, true. He looked at her and thought she was beautiful because she was, because she is, because she always will be. Her patterns exploded into brilliant light, every color imaginable dancing across her features. Joy, love, wonder, happiness so intense it filled the room. She pulled him close. Their faces inches apart, different biology, different species, but so similar in the ways that mattered. Both vulnerable, both brave, both in love. She told him something she had never told anyone. That violet color her patterns turned on their first meeting, that was not in any textbook because it was incredibly rare. It was the color of wonder, of complete amazement, of discovering something that changes everything you thought you knew. In 300 years, she had only felt it twice. Once when she first saw the stars as a child. Once when a human told her she was beautiful. Jinho felt tears in his eyes. Happy tears. He told her she gave him wonder too. Every day. Every moment. Just by being herself. By showing him what it meant to be truly alive, they kissed. Or what counted as kissing for their very different biology. A connection. A merging. A moment of complete understanding. When they pulled apart, both were glowing. Jinho from emotion. Nari from her patterns. Two beings radiating light. Radiating love. It was time. The students were waiting. Their future was waiting. A galaxy full of possibilities stretched before them. They walked to the main hall hand in hand. When they entered, the students fell silent, staring at them, at the obvious connection between human and Galaxy, at the love neither tried to hide. Jinho stood before them. He welcomed them, told them this institute would teach something new. Not strategy, not logic, not traditional diplomacy. They would learn the human way. The way of heart, the way of connection. He told them about Earth, about diversity, about how humans learn to find beauty in differences, how they learn to love across any boundary, how they turn diversity into strength. Then Nari spoke. She told them her story. 3 centuries of perfect logic, perfect emotional control, perfect loneliness, until one human showed her a different way, showed her that vulnerability was not weakness, that emotions were not flaws. That connection made everything better. The students listened, absorbed, interested. Some patterns shifted to thoughtful colors. Some body languages relaxed. Some began to understand. A student asked a question. If emotions were so important, why did the galaxy avoid them for so long? Jinho smiled. He explained that most species evolved alone. They never learned to connect across differences because they never had to. They conquered or isolated, built walls. Kept safe, Earth was different. Humans had no choice but to learn empathy. Too many cultures, too much diversity. They either learned to connect or destroyed themselves. They chose connection, and now they could teach that choice to others. Another student asked how to start. How to learn this human way, Nari answered. She said it started with one simple thing. Looking at another being and choosing to see beauty instead of strangeness, choosing to see potential instead of threat, choosing to open your heart instead of closing it. It was hard, scary, vulnerable, but it was worth it. Every time the first lesson continued, students asked questions, shared their own stories, began to open up. It was slow, tentative, but it was beginning. Change was happening. When the lesson ended, students left looking thoughtful. Changed. The seeds of empathy were planted. Time would tell what grew from them. That night, Jinho and Nari returned to their shared quarters. They had decided to live together. A human and a Galaxy sharing space, sharing life. It was unconventional. But many things about their relationship were unconventional. They stood at the window together, looking out at the stars. Billions of worlds, trillions of beings, all connected now, all part of something larger, all learning the human way. The way of heart, Nari asked what he was thinking. That same question from their first meeting. But now it held no fear, no worry. Just curiosity. Love. Jinho turned to her. He spoke in flawless Galaxy. He had been practicing, learning her language just as she learned his. He told her in her own tongue that she was still the most beautiful being he had ever seen. That her patterns were still like living artwork. That he loved her more every day, and he was honored, so deeply honored. That she saw the same beauty and humanity that he saw in her. Nari's patterns exploded into brilliance. Every color, every emotion, pure happiness, pure love, pure wonder. The same violet that started everything mixed with pink and gold and silver. A display that told everyone who saw it exactly how she felt. For the first time in Coalition history, other species understood what they were seeing. The human students had taught them, explained human perspective, showed them how to read emotions across species lines. Now when people saw Nari's patterns, they did not see alien strangeness. They saw love, beautiful, pure, honest love, and they celebrated it, because the galaxy was learning, was changing, was growing. Jinho and Nari held each other as the stars drifted past. Two beings from different worlds, different biologies, different histories, but united, connected in love. They had changed the galaxy, but more importantly, they had found each other.